Here are today's episode highlights. Every single day we had frijoles and arroz.
There's
like
always
waiting for us at the
frijoles.
house,
There is
right?
always frijoles in a
Beans
Mexican
and
house.
rice.
Y
Yes.
tortillas,
Yes.
y tortillas.
Yes.
Una
There's
casa
always-
mexicana sin
yes.
tortillas y tortillero, pues no es una casa mexicana, ¿verdad? Mis hijos no quieren hablar español. They don't speak Spanish. I don't know what to do. And I would always say, I would go home thinking, how is that possible?
My son, preschool came along, and this is where it's difficult, right? Because we were just speaking Spanish to them. They're now going into a school where it's all English speaking, and he felt different.
Our kids are biracial. Yours is
In your
biracial.
case?
Yeah.
Our kids are half and half,
Yes.
and my daughter, she really loves, the Latino heritage, right? But I feel so guilty that I did not expose her to Spanish a little more.
Just because I don't speak Spanish like my mom and my dad and abuelitas doesn't mean I don't embrace
Or I'm any
my
less.
heritage. Or
I'm any less Mexican.
Why are you hanging out with Diana? She's whitewashed. Yeah, I'd be
Oh,
called whitewashed.
whitewash.
They would
Oh,
call
my
me whitewash.
goodness.
Because your girlfriends were,
Yeah,
We're
well,
gringas.
Yeah,
They were
gringas.
white.
oh my, but don't call me a pocha because I'm not, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought pocha
Yeah.
just meant that you just didn't speak,
No.
Yeah.
No,
that's what it
Spanish.
was.
That's
I
what
thought
It has
That's
to
how
do-
I- that's how I
it's
perceived
more
it
of-
too.
It's more cultural. Like you don't feel the love and your passion for your parents' Mexican flag.
Oh,
you know?
I feel it.
Hey girl, welcome. We've been waiting for you.
Bienvenida. We are four comadres and we are so excited to have you here. I am Argelia.
I am Mindy.
I am Diana.
And I'm Janet. Join us. Grab that drink.
Get comfy, settle in, and get to know us.
As we get down with some real conversations.
And raise that glass to the true power of sisterhood.
Are you ready for us?
This is Comadres Unfiltered.
Salud! Salud!
Salud!
Hey!
Hey, girlfriends.
Hey, girls. Hey,
Chulas, ¿cómo
Comadres. Hi, comadres.
Hi.
¿Cómo están?
Feeling
Long
hot.
week. Feeling good.
Otro martes.
Happy to be here with you girls today.
It's a hot Tuesday. Let me just
It
say
is
the
a hot
weather has
Tuesday,
been
yes.
super hot out here in Cali.
Uh-huh.
Nice
Right?
and humid, though. Perfect for the skin.
Ooh, but not for the hair.
No,
Not
that's
for
true.
the hair. Not for the hair.
Not
Everything
for
is
the-
Don't mess
stickier.
with the hair. The
Exactly.
hair.
Oye, pero the summer invita a, like fiesta, salir, arreglarte, aunque sudemos. I mean, it's just the glow look. and
Yes, it's that you
yeah.
want to be outdoors. You want to wear little sleeveless stuff. When I'm picking out my outfits lately for our
Yeah.
shows, I'm like, I want to wear my summer stuff because in a few months we're gonna be wearing sweaters and hoodies and
Exactly.
yeah, our
And
winter
drinking
clothes.
coffee or tea.
or tea.
Less clothes in summer. I love it.
I know.
Speaking
Exactly.
of parties, who knows how to party? Like
The
nobody
Mexicans.
else. Hey, los
Mexicans know how to throw a party.
We do know how to throw a party.
And we always have a lot of food, and we have a good ambiente. Music and lots of people, and I love it.
No, es que
Mexicans
como-
know how to party.
It's like the meme, ¿no? ¿Se va a hacer la carnita asada o,
Yes.
o no se va a hacer
¿Se
la
hace o
carnita
no se
asada?
hace?
If you get invited to a carne asada, that's a good thing. That's a
That
good
is
Like
good.
they say, nobody can like the Mexican.
Yes.
The Mexican.
So I guess we're talking about our heritage today, our roots,
Yes,
right?
yes, we
Embracing
are.
our culture, embracing our mexicanidad or latinidad nowadays. That's
Yeah.
what we're using the term nowadays so that everyone feels included in the
Included.
conversation. So how proud are we of our roots and how we grew up being Mexican American? I mean, because I guess let's start there. How do we present ourselves? Since you were little, did you always say you're American? Because when I was a little girl, because I was born in Chicago, this is before labels and everything I was aware, I always say, I'm American. I was born in the U.S., so I'm American. But then my roots kicked in. Well, my parents taught me about, no eres mexicana, and tu música y tu comida. And that's kind of when it started to trigger, like, oh, I am different. I am not American, like, güera, of course.
just
Mhm.
American.
I'm just
Yeah.
American. But then you realize that, well, Mexico is part of America. So we are American.
Yeah.
Even though now I like to call myself Mexican American.
Mexican.
But you also grew up in
American.
Mexico, right? So that's
Yeah.
another big thing.
See, my
You
childhood
actually
was
did.
Grew up over
divided
there.
between here and there. Well, yes, I lived here. My home was in San Pedro. But, like many of us, summer in December was Mexico.
Yes.
Which I gotta say, sometimes I didn't like it, but now I thank my lucky stars and my parents for always making those travels, because it was because of those trips that I really learned how to celebrate who I am, Mexicana.
Yeah, I think part of what we were talking about is just how our kids are growing up and just revisiting how we grew up and what made us Mexican, what made us Latinos, what are the things that separated us from our friends that weren't Mexican or that weren't Latino. How did we do things differently when we were growing up? So I always go to food.
Yes.
Like every single day we had frijoles and arroz.
There's
like
always
waiting for us at the
frijoles.
house,
There is
right?
always frijoles in a
Beans and
Mexican
rice.
house.
Y
Yes.
tortillas,
Yes.
y tortillas.
Yes.
Una
There's
casa
always-
mexicana sin
Yes.
tortillas y tortillero, pues no es una casa
And when,
mexicana.
and when
Yeah,
you're hungry,
come on.
when you're out and about and you're hungry as a kid and you tell your mom, oh, can we go get some McDonald's? No. En la casa hay frijoles. Always. There's always frijoles at the house
There's
to eat.
food
at
You're not going to get McDonald's. When you were a kid, there was no McDonald's.
Yeah.
Always. That is
And
the backup.
salsa.
Another big thing with Mexicans are the backyard parties.
Oh, yeah.
Celebrating
Backyard parties.
Celebrating everything.
Uh-huh.
Everything deserves a celebration
Yes.
and loud ass music.
You know what? That's the most beautiful memory I have of my father. He could be whatever he was, not very
Yes.
responsible. But if there was something that my dad brought to the house, was that. He was the life of the party because of his music. Ponía las norteñas, he would play the guitar, he would play the keyboard, and it was always corridos, it was always Carlos y José, and it was always Ramon Ayala, and it was always, that music that till this day when I hear it, it's like, oh, it's taking me back to my roots. And that's when I realized, at one point it was a little bit embarrassing with my neighbors, like, oh, there it goes
Right.
again, the loud Mexican music. But now I feel like, oh my God, well, that's just who we are. We're always happy. And you're sad, you play music, rancheras. You're happy, you play rancheras. You just got in a fight
You're
with your
sad?
wife, you play rancheras.
And you know what's great about those Mexican parties that you're talking about? No matter how, when I was a kid, I didn't know if somebody was rich or poor or whatever. But no matter what, now looking back, I'm like, God, those people lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. But they had the whole driveway full of tables and tons of food. And they would never limit to oh, you can only bring your one kid. No,
Bring
they were
everybody, the whole block.
bring
Yeah.
everyone. And then, I mean, my parents would have parties at their house. And 3 cars full of people would show up, and I'm like, Mom, who are all those people? Well, no sé, mija, I don't know.
Los
Your
gorrones.
dad, your
Los
dad invited his
colados.
ahijado, and his ahijado brought his sister and his sister's husband, and the husband had a cousin in town, so they brought, and there was 3 or 4 families that we had no idea, and they'd all showed up to the party.
And another
there
thing
was
is,
always plenty of food for them.
For everyone. And another funny thing, they might have not had money
Yeah.
to buy nice things, right?
Right.
Those Nike shoes,
Yes.
whatever. But damn, they had money for that party, that food,
Yes.
The beer,
the music, the beer.
Yes.
I mean, you
The
could be
alcohol.
celebrating any type of birthday.
Yes.
And you always have beer there.
Yes.
Everybody's
That's true.
drunk and buzzed. It's
Yes.
like,
No matter
wow.
the age of the birthday.
Oh yeah, And
Always alcohol.
Oh
Lots
yeah,
of it.
alcohol all the time, and then the kids sleeping in their strollers. It's like,
Yes.
no, it's fine. Just cover it.
No.
I remember sleeping across
Yeah.
3
The
folding
chairs.
chairs. Yeah,
Nobody
3
left.
folding chairs and my
Nobody
dad's jacket on me at 2 in the morning.
Absolutely. Nowadays, you see these women just rushing out, all stressed out, right? Gotta go now, gotta put him to bed.
Yeah.
Girl, back in the day, who did that? Our parents didn't do that. They're like, no. They're with me, and they're gonna stay until I leave, and it could be
Yes.
12, 1.
Yes.
So funny. I remember that whenever
right.
we
So
would go to these parties, ¿verdad? Íbamos a las fiestas mexicanas, and
Yeah.
my sister Oralia and I would get tired, and we would go to my mom. Mamá, ya tengo sueño, ya vámonos. Ni se les ocurra decirle a su papá. And it's true because every time we go to a party, that was the first thing they would tell us. No nos digan at what time we're leaving, because you just could not ask your parents, when are we leaving?
Don't
Because
ruin their
they're
night.
They're
Yes.
in control.
That was their night.
That was their night, and we
Yes.
just
So
had
true.
to fall asleep in chairs
Yeah.
or in the sofa or wherever,
Yes.
because the loudness and
The
the
loud
music became our
music.
white noise.
No, you know
It would
why?
put us
You
to
know why,
bed.
girls? You know why? Because there was no such thing as hiring babysitters.
No.
No,
No
because the
such
whole
thing.
family was
It was
there.
it was the whole family was
Las
there.
abuelitas
Nobody can
were partying.
babysit.
Yes.
Everybody's there, and there's no babysitters. Everybody's just laying on the couch, on the floor, the stroller.
right.
I mean, that's the way it was, and that's
Yes.
how You knew you were Mexican.
Yeah.
That's right. But you know what? It was that. I think they had worked all week, right? They were working so hard, and it was their way to like let it out,
loose.
let their hair loose a little bit on the weekend. You know, it's Friday night or sometimes Saturday night. And it was all the family. Nobody ever made any plans on the weekends because everybody knew where they were going to be.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. That was our childhood.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't have friends outside of our family. We have a very big family. My dad is one of 13.
Oh, wow.
And my mom is one of 5. Of my cousins, I have 70 first cousins.
Wow.
So
First cousins.
First
Whoa.
cousins.
Oh my God.
That's a lot.
So between both of my mom, my parents, but you know, growing up in that kind of household, and not everybody was here. We would go to Mexico in the summers, you know, and nos íbamos al rancho, and it was like you said, like there were tons of people that I had no idea who were my cousins were, which kind of got a little tricky when I know in your teenage years. Like, am I related to that guy? I don't know.
Is he my cousin? Oh, but he's so cute.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah, but that's how we grew up. We grew up with lots of music, lots of food, lots of laughter, lots of dancing.
Yes.
Like, that's how we grew up. That's how we learned how to dance.
And your first best friends were your cousins.
Absolutely.
Sí.
Yes.
Las primas.
Yes.
But right now you were saying, you know, our parents work so hard, and you would think that on the weekend, no me molesten, I just want to like
Relax.
lock myself up in the house and watch some movies. But on the contrary, so what does that tell you about the value of family, right?
Yeah.
La parranda. Is it la parranda, la fiesta? It's just being together and just finally celebrating, just doing nothing.
Yes.
The week.
Really.
Yeah.
We accomplished a week, and we are going to spend half our check
Yes.
on beer and carne asada, arroz y frijoles.
It's letting loose.
Yes.
It's
Letting
letting
loose.
loose because you can't even have a damn conversation
No.
in half of those parties. You know what I'm talking about? The music is so,
So
freaking loud.
And
you're
live
like,
music.
what? Yeah. You can't even catch up with. I'll call you during the week so we can catch up.
Yeah.
You can't even catch up. You're dancing. It's so loud, right?
And they had live bands, like
Live
they had
bands.
live mariachis, live trios.
Couldn't buy
live
shoes. Couldn't buy the new Nikes.
Exactly.
But the banda
But they had a
was
banda.
there.
Yes.
It was like boom, boom,
Yes.
boom, 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 boom. I mean, it was there.
Oh yeah, you know, Athena, my daughter, went to her first nice quinceañera this year to Argelia's daughter, to,
Oh,
to
it's
Camila's. I
gorgeous,
mean,
yes.
that was a fancy, beautiful quinceañera. I was like, girl, you don't know the quinceañeras I went to in people's driveways, like folding tables and folding chairs. You know, that's that.
Girl, my
that was
quinceañera was in my
gymnasium.
backyard.
Plastic
Gymnasium.
tablecloths.
My quinceañera, my mom baked the cake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you know
Okay.
what? All the tias.
My mom
Yes,
baked a lopsided cake, put quince on there, you know.
Yes.
Let's go.
But you had a quinceañera.
Oh, yeah.
You
I had
one.
a long dress because I had come out of my cousin's wedding. My mom goes, that dress, we're going to cut it to the knee. That's your
Sí.
quinceañera dress
That's
right
there
there.
you go. It's true. I mean,
that's what it
we
was.
can't forget la birria.
La birria.
la
was
birria.
there.
That
las
would feed
carnitas.
everybody.
Yeah.
Birria would feed
it was the most economical
everybody.
thing to do, and it was the most delicious. And it's the traditional thing to
It
serve,
was.
honestly.
And it's
And-
delicious.
And then
It's
going back to
delicious.
family, also the tias participated with, oh, I'll bring the rice, and another tia would bring the beans, and then when it was time to warm up the tortillas,
Oh, yeah.
all the tias were at the stove
that's
warming up
true.
those tortillas, and
The
that was
kitchen.
so
It took a village.
dads
wonderful.
are playing
It was
dominoes
awesome.
outside
Yes. or barbecuing the
tartas or
carne asada.
barbecuing.
And that's another
Yeah.
sign of how you know you're Mexican, right?
Mexican, oh,
When
yeah.
it comes to those parties and all the men are together in the backyard y las mujeres in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, the women are
Which was a
separate.
bonding experience, you know. And
Yes.
to this day, I feel like now more couples are sharing the kitchen. Well, I've seen
They
parties now with Latinos.
Yes.
Where now we're all finally like together, hanging out, singing, cooking,
Yes,
doing whatnot.
true.
But back then it was like, no, los hombres para allá y las mujeres para acá. That division, right? That
Yeah.
separation.
Yeah.
But our kids are not seeing that anymore. I
No.
don't think
No,
they
it's
are.
evolved. I think it's evolved. You know, I think our relationships have evolved. And because of that, we all are getting along. We're going on date nights, you know, and
I know. When did our parents go out on date nights by themselves? Well,
Also,
Never.
we're having
Mine
it
didn't make it to
catered.
that.
Okay,
No.
we're having our parties catered now. Okay, let's be honest. Now we hire the taco guy
See.
to come. We ain't making tacos.
Didn't-
We're not making
Yeah,
rice and
you're
beans.
right.
Even the tias are not
Yeah.
making tacos anymore. They're like, no,
No.
no, no, I'm
A la
tired.
Vallarta.
Yes, a la Vallarta.
Yo ya no.
Yeah, no,
Yo
they're
ya
done.
no.
We're calling in the
They
tacos
pay
guy.
their dues, right?
They
It's like,
did
it's
pay their
done.
dues.
Get
Yeah.
the catering guy. Get the pollero.
Yes.
Come over.
So you think our parties are very different now, right?
They're
They have
Absolutely.
transitioned into more, I don't know, I guess more convenient. You know,
Yeah.
less time in the kitchen cooking because
Yes.
we work so hard.
I was
During
gonna
the
And we
week.
say.
don't have as many parties,
Yeah,
you know, and I think
también.
that's part of it. We grew up so differently, and just I think there wasn't a lot going on outside of our families, you know, aside from school. As soon as we went off to college, I think that changed. It changed our lives. It changed our parents' lives. You know, now they come to us a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we would go to them, right?
Right.
That was our hub. Like our family's home was our hub. And that has changed since we've had kids and how we are raising them now. And, you know, we talk about how we grew up and what made us Latinos. And then when we're raising our kids or when we have kids, we feel like we're going to raise them with a lot of the same values that we have learned to just embrace
Yes.
and love, and the values and the morals that we were raised with, because those are the things that I just am so grateful for. But it's hard to bring in a lot of those, you know, cultural elements that we grew up
And
with.
traditions,
And
right?
traditions.
It is.
Yeah,
It
it
really
is.
is. You know, working in radio, I remember getting these phone calls from moms that would express their concern and their worry. We got these calls so many times. Back in the day, I was single, obviously. And that comment or concern was, Argelia, mis hijos no quieren hablar español. They don't speak Spanish. I don't know what to do. And I would always say, I would go home thinking, how is that possible? I mean, if you speak Spanish as a mom and your house, you know, everybody speaks Spanish, you're calling the shots and your child should be able to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that's never going to happen to me because I'm going to make sure that my kids speak Spanish. But then you finally, you know, raise your own family. And then you marry someone that is fluent in Spanish, like in my case. And you're like, oh, my kids are going to speak
For
Spanish
sure.
100%,
Yeah.
like mommy and my mom and my grandma and everyone, right? And then I get it. I
Yeah.
get it, how challenging it is because the situations are different. We grew up in a household, at least in my case, where both my mom and dad spoke Spanish all the time. Mind you, my dad was born here and he was first generation and he spoke English. But because my mom didn't speak English, all they spoke in the house was Spanish. So by default and by no choice, we grew up only speaking Spanish really because of my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Later in life, I discovered that my dad, you know, spoke English. And I was like, how cool is that I could speak English with him? And one day I got home and I started to say something in English. Y me dijo, en esta casa no se habla inglés.
Oh, wow.
It was like a rule. But the way he said it, it was a very demanding, you know, strict dad. And he was. And we never spoke English in the house.
My dad was the same way.
So we were forced
really?
to speak Spanish
Mm-hmm.
because of my mom, and my dad could, but I guess it was, and now I thank him because I felt like maybe he'd be lenient. Maybe I would have lost it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because now in my case, in our household, which is a concern that many parents are facing, is we speak English. And once our kids pick up that speak English, of course it becomes more convenient for everyone. Mind you, my girls spoke Spanish first because guess what? Abuelita was also raising them. So that was a big help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But then what happens when they go to school? Their friends don't speak Spanish. The teachers don't speak Spanish.
Right.
But mind you, the girls, in Cami's case, she was the only child in pre-K that spoke Spanish and not a word of English. So she became, you know, like señalada. She became like the only kid that felt different because all of a sudden everybody's speaking English to everyone and the teacher is speaking Spanish to her. And I kind of had to like, you know,
That's
in.
the
I
hard
had to give
part.
in. And the teacher said, I'm going to have to start speaking English to your child because she's feeling that she's being
Different.
treated different.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand what everybody else is saying.
Yeah.
And I observed Camila and I was like, yeah, she felt reserved. She was like cornered. she felt like she couldn't participate because she didn't understand the language.
Right.
So that's when I had to give in, and then the English kicked in.
Yeah.
But in the house, we made sure that she spoke Spanish. But then, you know, they
It's
go to-
just it's just hard.
It's really
You know, it depends
hard.
on your environment and where
Yeah.
you grow up. For
Absolutely.
example, in my situation, I grew up in East Los Angeles.
Same us. Yeah.
Honestly, everybody on the streets they were speaking Spanish. It
Yeah.
was just easy to communicate with. Even like
In the
the grocery
stores.
owners and the cashiers were
Yeah.
all Mexican, and it was just you used it. And that's how you become fluent.
Yeah.
Now my mother, to this day, speaks very little English. To
Yeah.
this day,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
only knows a few little words just to get by.
Yeah.
She just didn't need to because she lived in, I call it, it was like Mexico.
Little
Living-
Mexico.
Little
Claro.
Mexico, right? And then my father also spoke very little English. He got by a little bit better than my mom, but his first language was English. Spanish. So when we would get home from school, it was all Spanish.
See, all Spanish.
Weekends, all Spanish. But I still think it was great for me. I'm so grateful for that because being bilingual is wonderful.
course.
Speaking more than one language is amazing. Look at other countries. They speak 3, 4, 5. I mean,
And you
many
wonder how they pick
languages.
it up since they're kids,
They,
right?
they pick it up since they're young, and it's amazing. But here's another thing, is that I have people in my family that were married into my family who are Mexican but don't speak one word in Spanish, because back in the day
See.
you couldn't you wanted to assimilate. So as a matter of fact, some states here in the U.S. banned Spanish
See.
speaking in schools.
See.
Not until 1968. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my gosh.
what, 56 years ago, right? I was born in 69, so back in 1968, they passed the bilingual,
Program, which I was a part of. I was a part of that experiment.
program. Exactly. So things have changed. There are a lot of kids out there who are Mexican, but don't speak a word in Spanish. Not because they didn't want to.
Right.
It was because their parents were like,
Scared, yeah.
scared. They're like,
See,
just speak
but that's the difference.
the language.
It was like the simulation was like, I
It was
want to
different, yes.
be a part of this. I want to belong, no discrimination. But with our generation, I mean,
It's different.
now we're embracing, like you said, the dual language schools.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unfortunately, not all schools are like that, but I think that's wonderful that many public schools now are dual language. I know my nephew is going to one, and all of his instructions since I think up to 4th grade will be all Spanish.
I love
and I think
that.
that's great.
But our kids are growing up in a very different
reality.
Yes.
And so when we grew up with a lot of people that look like us, like a lot of Latinos, a lot of Mexican
Yes.
people,
And our cousins,
and
you
their
just said it.
cousins.
They
We
were-
grew up
they
with
were
our
a crowd.
cousins. And unfortunately, we've all moved away from each other. We used to also live right next to each other.
We will walk.
My parents bought their house right after my uncle bought his house in Gardena. My parents bought their house a few blocks away. Then my aunt and my uncle bought their houses away from each
Wow.
other and a blocks away from all their house.
To be close.
So everybody can walk to each other's home, and they created their own community
See.
in this new neighborhood, which allowed for us to see each other more often because I can go there for coffee in the morning or, comida, after work. Now, we have moved away. And by moving away, it lessens those moments that you can create.
Yeah.
And also, we have moved into areas that are much more gentrified. And so you have
And diverse.
diverse. And so not everybody speaks Spanish. And I think, you shared your story about the kids, and my kids also spoke Spanish from the day they were born because I had the same thing, right?
Yes.
There's nothing like parenting when you don't have kids, right?
Exactly.
Like all the ideas and everything you want, like there is nothing
that
like
is not gonna
parenting
happen
with
to
no
my kid.
children.
Oh, yeah.
I am not going to do that. And this is how, and then you have kids and you're like, so I did. We started speaking Spanish. Carl and I both spoke Spanish to the kids. Nathan, and so my son, preschool came along, and this is where it's difficult, right? Because we were just speaking Spanish to them. They're now going into a school where it's all English speaking, and he felt different.
Yeah.
And also when we had play dates or when we were with other moms, I felt like I needed to speak English because I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so here I am speaking to him in English. And what happens? Mommy speaks English.
They discover.
They speak English and they speak English and they speak. So I'm going to speak English because this is just the easiest way to communicate.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what happened. And he didn't take to it as, you know, he didn't want to be different. Now, Emma, my daughter, she likes speaking Spanish. She would go in there and say, yo soy princesa mexicana, you know, like she loved it. And she didn't mind being different, you know, she didn't mind, you know, someone telling her that you speak Spanish. Yes, I do. You know, she was very proud
of it. Yeah.
But it's not because my son wasn't proud. It was because he was just shy. You know, he didn't want to be different. And so navigating not only how you're going to do things, but then you have two different children or different children who take to things differently.
You're right.
That's been hard.
Sienna wants to learn Spanish. So with Athena, same thing. She was my first from the moment she was delivered and they put her on my chest. Her first words that she heard out of my mouth were in Spanish. And so it was Spanish, Spanish, Spanish. I have the cutest videos of her when she was like 2, 3 years old, speaking in Spanish. I have cute voicemails that she would leave me in Spanish. Her Spanish was beautiful. And then I was working when she was little. So we had a nanny and the nanny spoke Spanish to her. So it was great. And then when I started looking into preschools, I wanted a preschool where she would only speak Spanish. But here in the Valley, there are no Spanish speaking preschools.
It's really hard.
They're in Pasadena, they're in Culver City. So they're out of the Valley. I would have to drive out. I even went to school. I was like, I'm going to open up my own Spanish preschool.
Oh, wow.
I went to school for a semester. I went to community college and I wanted to get, you know, credentialed to open my own Spanish preschool. But I know there are preschools here in the Valley, but they're more like ESL, like English as a second language. I wanted one for kids who want to learn Spanish. And I know there's a lot of families. I knew, like Janet and I would go on play dates with our kids and we would speak Spanish to our kids, which was wonderful. But yeah, then when she went off to preschool, she's like, oh, everybody's speaking English. And then she would get in the car and I'd be like, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo te fue hoy? And she'd be like, Mommy, why do I have to speak Spanish? And I'm like, porque sí. And then it started becoming a conflict every day when I'd pick her up from school. She didn't want to speak to me in Spanish. Now she just wanted to speak English. And then I got pregnant with Sienna and I was taking Athena like to Pasadena to be tutored once a week in Spanish. And then she was getting tired of it. She didn't want to do it anymore. And and then her dad.
Nobody to practice it with.
Nobody,
also, right?
Because only
problem.
Grandma. We didn't have a nanny anymore.
Her
she would practice it with my mom, but she doesn't see my mom that often. And then her dad doesn't speak Spanish, so it was just like English became the norm. And then when the baby Sienna was born, the Sienna only heard Athena and I speaking English, and so she hasn't picked up really any Spanish, and that makes me sad.
And there is a difference when you marry, you know, when your partner is Mexican or no Spanish, right? Versus you marrying out of your you know, race, right? When you marry a gringo, it's like, you know, they come in strong with their English, and then you speak to them in Spanish, and they're like, well, let's focus on the English. Let her really learn the English. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You can layer it. You know,
so
kids
in
are
your
like,
case,
in my case,
were you able to like bounce back and forth between
you know
English
what
and Spanish?
I do feel guilt. And I'll tell you why, because I tried at the beginning to do it and my mother would come by and help, right? Those first toddler years, she would come by and help me and speak to her, you know, in Spanish and all that. So that was really nice. And I thought, you know, everything's perfect. But no, after we moved away from my mom, right? And it was only like 20 or 30 minutes away. She didn't come as often. And then honestly, life got busy.
Yeah.
And then, you know, all her little schoolmates, they were all different ethnicities. There were no Latinos in there. I'm going to be really honest with you. It was all Koreans, little Japanese kids, you know, other little, you know, gringos. So it was really tough. Who is she going to practice the Spanish with, right?
And she couldn't do that with you. Because that's one thing that I felt like, okay.
It was different.
I get it that my girls also were raised by my mom. My mom lived with me for 7 years. So imagine they had the best teacher at home. And then watching Gorda y la Flaca, you know? And
no, and
then imagine watching
it.
TV. We grew up watching novelas. We grew up watching Spanish programming, and these kids are not anymore. But having my mom at home helped a lot with those shows. But you're right, because the grandma effect is very positive. Till this day, the girls, as soon as they see abuelitas, the Spanish kicks in. So mis hijas saben hablar español. What I notice is the confidence level, because I've asked them, the day that you will make me extremely, 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 extremely happy, like me as a mommy, is when one day you'll have a conversation in Spanish with me. because I know they speak Spanish with abuelitas and las tías y algunas primitas, and when we go to Mexico, but it's with me and with Omar. Interesting how Omar, being, you know, an immigrant and picked up English until he was 16, 17. Well, of course, it was shocking to me when he started to speak English with the girls. And believe it or not, that was a cause of many discussions because here I thought, oh, yo ya la hice. I married a man that is very fluent in Spanish. We're never going to have this issue. But then Omar starts speaking English to the girls, and I had a fit. And guess what his reason was? Well, I need to practice my English too. And I was like, no, go on Inglés sin barreras, you know, and learn your English there, but not in the house, because now the girls discovered that mommy and daddy speak English. And it was like, it's just convenient and easier. But I did talk to the girls one day and I said, ¿Por qué no se animan a just take it out, spit it out? Yeah. And because I've heard them speak Spanish. Yeah. But I noticed that they lower their volume. Yes. And it comes down to confidence. Yeah.
They're afraid.
And I can see how in our case, you know, mommy and daddy, they work in radio, you know, their Spanish is this level. So I can see how their confidence is what is holding them back. But trust me, they have it here. Yes. They have it here. Yeah. They have it here. They just have to spit it out with confidence. And I think it will happen as long as we don't give up. We cannot give up, Diana. No, we cannot give up. Summer camps, I don't care. Mira, ¿quién iba a decir que yo iba a pagar por summer camp for the girls? Yeah. It wasn't like they were learning Spanish. It was just like reinforcing.
It's just a practicing.
You know?
It's the practicing. And that's what it is. Like I sometimes she doesn't want to go see my mom. Oh, do we have to go see grandma? Yes. Because even if it's just a few sentences that she's, you know, small conversations she has with my mom, or hearing my mom say things, I like her to practice it. Yes. That's what it is. It's even for us. Yeah. Like, well, you practice it every day with your show, but I mean, I don't know about you girls. I don't practice it as much as I would like to. And I definitely see my Spanish sometimes decline. You know when it was my best? When I was in high school and I was in AP Spanish literature classes. Okay. I read reports that I wrote, like book reports, and I'm like, I wrote this? In like Spanish. My Spanish was amazing. I was also like madly in love with this boy in Mexico that I thought I was gonna marry. So I was like, my Spanish has to be perfect, so I'm gonna marry him and go live there. But no, and I wish my daughter was into that. I wish Athena was into it. But
maybe
you know what's
come.
funny?
Maybe it will come.
Sometimes she does gossip with me. Mami, mira esa señora. Like she will pop, like it'll just like come out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh. See,
well, they have it inside of them. I think it's just key. It's just you know, it doesn't have to continue. Como dices tú, we can pick it up where they are, meet them where they are. I think the older they get, now that they're teenagers, I think they're starting to, you know, listen to the importance of speaking another language.
Seeing the value.
And so now, they're seeing the value in it. And I think, you know, at least for the kids, they do have Spanish classes, right? They do have Spanish class at school. But, you know, it's finding more spaces for them to speak, finding more spaces for them to learn. And, you know, when we go to Mexico now, you know, like the kids are hanging out with their cousins in San Juan.
And they adjust.
And listen, they don't speak English. So, you know, my family doesn't speak English over there. So the kids have to adjust and they have to chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And Emma ends up being Nathan's translator for now. But, you know, all he needs to do is meet a San Juanera later on.
That's true. It's that immersion.
Then his Spanish is going to come out. You know?
That's all he needs to meet a little cute girl.
You know what? One thing that we did, Omar and I, for a while is when we would have dinner, we would play music in the background in español. You know, un día eran los panchos, you know, also because we also wanted to be in love with their culture, right?
Yes.
So los panchos, Juan Gabriel, Rocío Dúrcal. So I grill these girls because even though they're listening to the songs that they probably wouldn't have on their, you know, phones, they know it's part of their culture, and they are listening to those lyrics.
Yes.
Why do you think they love Selena? Yes. Selena canta en español, and they know what she's singing about. So it's in there.
I think it's in there.
You got
a culture.
It's kind of like indirectly. It's always like there has to be like a splash of Spanish every day somehow, somewhere in their life, whether it's through music, whether it's novelas or movies, whether it's, you know, going to East LA for the weekend and go ve a la tienda a comprarte dos elotes, you know, even like that.
Food, you know, that's something that like happens every day, you know, and we know more food now, so now we're making pasta and we're making
Enchiladas.
well,
también.
that's the point, that we have to like start remembering to make all of the food that we grew up with, because that's an introduction into our traditions and our culture too.
Sí.
And sometimes it's easy to just put the salmon and the broccoli in the pan and put it in the oven.
Yeah.
But making those pozole and
It's just too
enchiladas
fattening,
and-
girl.
I know.
I know.
Like if you
Well, there's different versions.
Tamales,
Tortas, tostadas,
It's all carbs. So like,
La dieta de los
salmon, a little
sanjuaneros.
broth.
Oh
We're
no,
gonna
we go to
stick with that.
Vallarta and we buy our bolillos. and
Chicharrón.
I make tortas a
can't,
lot.
girl.
Sienna loves her
Diabetes, girl,
tortas.
diabetes. That's why Mexicanos
Las
are
conchas.
diabetic.
Shout out to Amapola for all their
Amapola.
tortillas. Yes.
Exactly.
No, but you're right. The cooking says a lot about our culture, and to remind them that this reminds them of home, right? And the roots.
Yeah.
One of the things that I will make often to remind them of grandma is, well, porque mi mamá, no es por nada, sopa de fideo. Esas sopitas de fideo.
Yes.
I mean, that's how we grew
Comfort
up, right?
food.
Right,
That
you were
is.
talking
Comfort
about
food, little
tortillas
soup.
and
Comfort
frijoles and arroz. En mi caso era sopa de fideo.
Sopa de fideo, same here.
Every
Yeah.
single
That was us
day
too.
we had a sopita de fideo, and it
Yes.
is the easiest thing to make. And I make sure that I make it so because it's the connection with grandma, a connection to our roots, to our culture, to traditions. Just because they don't dominate Spanish like we do, it is a second generation.
Yeah.
I mean, we are
Yes.
first generation.
Yeah.
We're not justifying them, because a lot of them say that second generation will speak Spanish like watered down version.
Well, the
It's just a
percentage is
second
lower.
generation, because
Yeah.
think about it. Just think about what's happening in their lives now. Just the schooling, the education, the
Yeah.
experiences that we're giving them.
Yes.
I'm not justifying it, but we have to kind of like remind them of,
I mean,
of who
Gomes,
they are with our foods,
Yes.
maybe.
I mean, less and less people it's a fact, they're speaking Spanish.
It's scary.
Less and
It's
less
scary.
people are speaking
And
Spanish.
Our kids are biracial. Yours is
In your
biracial.
case.
Yeah.
Our kids are half and half,
Yes.
and my daughter, she really loves, the Latino heritage, right? But I feel so guilty that I did not expose her to Spanish a little more. But she loves Mexico, and I want her to explore more. That's one of my dreams, to take her to Mexico a little more, so she does want to learn Spanish. And I even have this like little poster on my refrigerator that says, "In this home we speak Español."
Español.
But then honestly, I forget. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like my busy life, right?
Yeah.
But I want to exercise that because I think it's an advantage, and I want her to also see the value in that.
Yeah.
In speaking languages, more than one, even learning a third language. I want to expose her to that as well.
But right now you've said it like 3 times already. I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty. You know what? I don't feel guilty because I've tried my freaking best. And these girls know that I've tried everywhere, how to just put it in their tongues and in their heart. But I remember that when I was in college, one of my friends kept saying, well, you're lucky that you speak Spanish because your parents spoke to you in Spanish. It's my mom's fault and my dad's fault that they never spoke Spanish to me. And it was always blaming the parents and blaming the parents and blaming the parents. And one day I was just so upset, and I said, girl, how old are you? And she's like, well, 19. I go, it's never too late to pick up a new language. Okay, maybe your parents didn't teach you. That's on them. But right now you're 19. You can get an elective course and start learning Spanish. If our kids really want to brush up on their Spanish,
They
Alexa,
can.
pick up. Tú ya hiciste tu parte. You already did your part with the factors and the challenges that are out there now. I already did my part. I don't feel guilty. Do I want them to be fluent like mommy and daddy? Of course I do. But you know what? Now it's on them. And the fact that they're taking Spanish courses and the APs, that says a lot about our kids. It does say that they are very proud of who they are and what we taught them. But now it's on them. Because forcing them tampoco funciona.
You can't force.
You can't force
You
them.
can't
You don't want
force
them
They're
to
going
hate
to
it.
dislike it.
Yeah,
Yes.
you don't want
But
them
it
to-
is in their blood a little bit because let's face it, when we go to events, and they could even be, gringo events, white events, when they hear that Pitbull or that, that Latino music,
Yes.
everybody runs to the floor. Like my daughter loves Pitbull. I was in shock when I heard her playlist. She's like, Mom, have you heard of Peso Pluma? I'm like, what?
Oh, the whole generation.
Yes. So let me
And they
tell
like
you,
Bad Bunny?
but it's in their blood, that Latino, fire, right? It's already in there. They love
Yes.
they love their heritage, and That's what matters the most. Even if their English will never be perfect, that
Well, maybe they will.
they've cherished their heritage.
Yes.
That's important.
But
That's
it's
what I
finding
think.
out who you are, right?
Yeah.
Like they're figuring out who they are and where they come from. And I think, all of our experience and the people that we've exposed them to gives them a little bit more, like another piece to the puzzle of like where they came from. And, more of that, like more of going to Mexico, more of the food, more of the, we grew up with religion, the
Sí.
music, and even our family dynamics, like growing up Mexican, we just did things differently, right?
Very
And so,
different.
yeah, and they see all of that, and now when they start comparing themselves to their friends or their friends' households, they're like, oh, we do things differently. Well, yeah, it's because your parents grew up
Sí.
differently, and your parents are going to see things differently. We were just talking about how the kids don't do sleepovers as much, and like, I didn't think I was going to talk about how you're going to parent before you have kids.
Exactly.
They're not going to do that, and they're not going to do this, and they're not going to do that, and and then you're like, oh, like I'm making friends like
Sí.
that are becoming family, and these people that we share so much time with, I know who they are. So I will allow my child, who's known their children since they're like, it's just different. Like these kids are growing up a little bit different, but they still see our Mexicanidad, our
Totalmente.
Latinidad in our families and how we parent and how we do things a little differently.
Yeah, and you know
Yeah.
how I also realize that they're very proud of their roots when the World Cup comes and they want to
Yes.
wear the Mexico T-shirt.
That's right.
Oh, yes.
And we've traveled to a few World Cups and they're wearing proudly the Mexican jersey opposed to the U.S. one, which they were born here, but
Yeah.
it's está en su sangre, it's in there, and let's talk about the No Sabo kids generation. This is that No Sabo, which it started like an insult to a kid that was
Yes.
interviewed and answered, poorly in Spanish, and he said no sabo instead of no sé.
Which is grammatically incorrect.
Yes, and then it just went viral, and it was all like making fun of this kid. But it was when people were making fun of this kid, you're making fun of an entire generation that speaks that way, right? So at the beginning, these kids were like, oh wow, yeah, I don't know how to speak Spanish, and the parents are embarrassed. But now these kids are embracing the fact, you know what? This is who I am. Just what you said.
That's right.
That doesn't, just because I don't speak Spanish like my mom and my dad and abuelitas doesn't mean I don't embrace
Or I'm any
my
less.
heritage. Or
I'm any less Mexican than somebody who does speak Spanish. And that's important for them to know too,
Yeah.
because just because you don't speak Spanish does not mean you're any less Mexican. You are fully Mexican. You are 100% Mexican. You are 100% American. And that is something that I also, from that No Sabo kid generation, and we've always been told, oh, like, we've gone to Mexico. We don't feel like we're fully Mexican, right? We're
Yeah.
here. We don't
Yes,
feel like
that's
we're fully
true.
American,
That
right?
is
Ni de aquí,
absolutely true.
ni de aquí,
Yeah.
ni de allá. And I think that has helped even us. I remember possibly writing about this, in so many essays throughout school, right? Ni de aquí, ni de allá. I'm not from here, neither am I from there. And finding that space, like, who am I? Where am I from? Who do I identify with more? I'm not fully that, and I'm not fully this, but you're fully you, and you are 100% that, and you're 100% that, and that makes you even 200% of
Yes.
whatever you are. And if that doesn't include language, then that doesn't include language. But there's a new day to
Yeah.
learn a new language. There's a new day for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. It doesn't make you any less of who you are or any more of who you are, so that's good.
It's so funny. I always identify as Mexican.
Yeah.
I know I was born here. I was raised here. But I don't know, when people ask me, I always just say, oh, I'm Mexican. Oh, I do this because I'm Mexican. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I never say I'm American. I mean, yes, I'm American. I was born here. But I always identify as I'm Mexican.
So do I. I
don't
always say
know.
I'm Mexican.
Yeah.
With
Where are you
me,
from, Mexico?
Yeah, Mexican.
But you
I'm
know what
Mexican.
happened with me is that because I lived in Mexico for 2 years, I truly felt what Janet just said, that I wasn't like the kids from San Juan, like, just the way they grew up. It was very different. And then I come back and I land in East LA, and it wasn't until I land in East LA where kind of like my both worlds came together. And it's really where, oh my, no sé, something happened where I really truly felt proud of being both. And ever since then, I adopted the Mexican American term, fully Mexican, because obviously of my background, and I've lived in Mexico, and I know what it is to live in el barrio and go to school even there. But I also feel like I'm so much of as American as, you know, like a girl in the valley. And so that's when I adopted my Mexican American, just, what is it, label? I don't know, but it's just, I like to say I'm
Identity.
Mexican
And you were
American.
proud. I mean, you've always been proud,
I've
right,
always
to
been
say
proud
it.
to say, I've never said Chicana.
No.
Yeah,
I
neither
don't
have
use that
I.
word either.
I don't identify with the word
Latina or
Chicana.
Hispano. I
But we
always
don't
go
grow.
for
We don't
Mexican
identify
American.
because we're first generation. First generation, we are more Mexican from Mexico. I think Chicano has been a culture, which is a wonderful culture that we just were never exposed to. It's a culture of like first, second, third generation
Yes.
Mexicans that have reclaimed what it is for them to feel Mexican. That have gone through the you are not allowed to
That's
speak
right.
Spanish and you need to assimilate, and they try to hold on to their roots in the way that they felt was closest to them. So I didn't identify so much with the Chicanos. I respect the
term,
culture.
yeah.
Well,
Which is
and the
something that
culture.
rose in the 60s.
Yeah. And
know?
the culture.
Yeah.
You know, I identify with Mexico. I identify going with San Juan de los Lagos in the summer, you know, and I identify with being raised that way, you know.
We're not
parents.
pochas.
No,
Right,
no.
we're
Eso
not.
sí, no. I would hate that term. When I was in San
Yes.
Juan in
Oh,
school,
yes.
oh, llegó la pochita. And I
Yes.
hated that term because
Right.
we
I
know
got
what
called
that
that
means,
too.
right? When
It's
you
like a slang word
well,
too.
it's a pocha apparently is someone that, yes, you're Mexican American or just Mexican looking, but you don't know anything or live your culture or traditions or there's no connection to your roots.
And the
at all.
reason
You
why
don't
we
live
d-
that.
and the reason why we don't like that term is because we
We
want
are
to feel
connected.
like we fit in, and we didn't fit in over there. We didn't fit in. We're like, no, I'm just like you, and they're telling us, no, you're a little different. And we were, right?
We were.
We were growing up in the U.S. When we went to Mexico, we just have a little bit different perspective. We did things a
Yes,
little
we're
bit different. We
different.
spoke English.
Yeah.
You know, our cousins didn't speak English. And so, you know, and we saw it as something that we didn't want to be called. But now looking back, I'm like, yeah, we were a little different. We just have to like reclaim that a little bit.
We were different, but we still knew the value of enjoying a posada. You know, we
Absolutely.
knew the value of cooking with grandma. We knew the
Yeah.
value of, you know, playing the loud music and it wasn't embarrassing. And we knew the value of, you know, being baptized, you know, confirmation, communion, and quinceañeras, like full blast. Like, o sea, we were connected to our culture and traditions. Una pochita es cuando, it's when someone is completely disconnected from
Yeah.
all of that. And they're, you know, and I've met women and men that are Mexican American, but they don't live the life that their ancestors lived, like, you know, like 3 generations down. And they're okay with that. But don't call me a pocha because I'm not, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought pocha
Yeah.
just meant that you just didn't speak,
No.
Yeah.
No,
you know,
no,
that's what it
Spanish.
was.
That's
I
what
thought
I,
It has
That's
to
how
do-
I- that's how I
it's
perceived
more
it, too.
It's more cultural. Like you don't feel the love and your passion for your parents' Mexican flag.
Oh,
you know?
I feel it.
Oh.
I'm
You
always,
feel
and
it.
I love being like the token Mexican amongst like, if I'm in a crowd where it's just like more white people or other races that are not, I love being the token Mexican. I am so proud of that. I am so
Yeah.
proud of my culture and the language that I speak and everything, like all my experiences in Mexico. I love that. And, you know, I think I brought this up to you guys. When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of Mexican friends, especially like in high school. When I was in elementary school,
Interesting.
a lot of the kids that I went to, because I was in San Fernando, were Latinos. And then when I went to high school, it was like more of a mixture of more kids from the Valley area. But most of my friends were white. And I
Really?
remember like the other 2 Mexican friends that I have, same thing. Their friends were mostly white. So we were like the 3 of us. I remember we were in our Spanish literature class. We were like the 3, you know, we would hang out together, you know, in class. But then when we'd walk out of class, it's like all our friends' circles were white. My very, very best friend from high school, she's from Croatia.
oh wow.
And it just, I don't know. I still till this day, like most of you guys, I think are like my first Latina
Crew?
crew.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Most of
Wow.
my best friends, like over the years, have been non-Latinas.
That's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
That's also how we grow up,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Like
how
the
we
people
grow
that
up.
are around us, the people who you connect with. As we know, sometimes you connect with people, sometimes you don't. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to connect with every single Latina or, none. It's just, who you connect with. And
The
that's
Latinas in high school did not like me. I don't know why.
That is interesting.
No me juntaban. They didn't want me to
That
be a part of
is
the Latino circle. The
so
boys liked me,
strange.
but the girls would they would get on the
It's
the
high
Hispanic
school.
guys. Yeah, they
It's
didn't. They
high
were like, "Why are you
school.
hanging out with Diana? She's whitewashed." Yeah, I'd be called
Oh,
whitewashed.
whitewash.
They would
Oh
call
my
me whitewash.
goodness.
Because your girlfriends were.
Yeah,
We're
well,
gringas.
yeah,
They were
gringas.
white.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Isn't that?
I mean,
funny?
I'm so proud of I am very proud because I have so many great memories. But also, when I see all of my gringa white girlfriends, enjoying Mexico, how much
Yes.
they love Mexico.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
We're gonna go to
Yeah.
Cabo. We're gonna go to
And they
Cancun.
love you, don't
They
they?
yes,
They
they
love
just
you.
They just love the whole culture, how
Yes.
spicy we are. We do
Yes.
bring some spiciness.
I love
It-
being
you
the
know,
token
right?
Mexican.
It's,
I
it
love
is fun, I have to say. And who doesn't like good Mexican food? I mean, come on.
right?
Right? I mean, good Mexican
Yes.
food. Like, people love our food, no matter
No,
what
see.
nationality
Maybe
you are.
my guacamole sucks, but let me tell you, everyone around me loves it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, this world is so big and beautiful, and we've traveled and we've seen cultures and we've seen
Yes.
similarities, right?
Oh,
More,
yes,
more
we
than
have.
differences. There's so many
Absolutely.
similarities. But I always, when I hear our music, our rancheras, or
Luis Miguel.
or well, yeah, no. But I always tell the girls, I always thank God for choosing me to have Mexican roots, because I mean, think about it. We could have been from another part of the world, and I'm sure that everyone that's listening that's from another part of the world feels the same way.
Yes.
But I honestly do thank God that me hizo mexicana, just that I
Yeah.
was born on this side of the country or
Yeah.
the world. But you're right. I'm more Mexican than American. American because I was just born on this soil, but
Right.
soy mexicana, and I'm like, I love that. It's really hard to explain the passion.
Well, if you grew up in the same town that we did, and that's, it's the second most visited pilgrimage site in all of Mexico. So there's a pride
Yes.
After La
that go
Virgen, yeah.
after La Virgen de San
So-
Juan.
Mhm.
And there is just the most beautiful culture, I think, that has been created there with La Virgen de San Juan. And going back to it, and seeing all your family just grow up around that neighborhood. I mean, there's a huge pride that
And-
goes along with it.
And we are lucky that we are still experiencing a lot of what our parents grew up with, and that we went to Mexico and we had so many experiences, because
Yes.
our grandkids are probably not going to have that. And then they will be kind of disconnected, unfortunately, to our culture. I mean, unless we keep it going.
We keep
but I
it
mean,
going.
It's, yeah.
but they will be more American. Our future, kids, our kids, they're not going to have that same connection.
And we don't know who they're going to marry.
Exactly.
Who
They
knows?
could
Yeah.
marry some other,
Korean,
a Korean,
yeah,
or Japanese,
or Arab, or
or
something.
something.
Yeah.
We just never know. And then,
Yeah.
then they get split.
You're right, because
Exactly.
right now
Just get
they
split.
have the connection of grandmas. I mean,
Yes.
think
Right.
about it. All our girls have their grandmas alive.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're hanging on to las
Yeah.
abuelitas because they are like the book of
Right. Yeah.
passing down the traditions, right? And that's a lot of pressure on us, because what's going to happen when we are the grandma?
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to us
Yeah.
to follow in to the
That's
footsteps
right.
of what our moms taught us,
Yes.
to continue the cycle and the traditions and passing on the baton. But if we give up, then it's
Yeah,
going to be on
it's
us.
gonna get lost.
So
And
I
this is
never
a great
thought about it.
reminder.
I know. I didn't
This is
think
such
about
a
that.
great reminder. I think having this episode, and I hope whoever's listening also feels this way, but it's a reminder to give ourselves challenges
Yes.
and reminders to do more,
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? So we have to do more. We have to challenge ourselves to expose these kids and ourselves, right?
Yes.
To more music, to more culture, to maybe taking that trip, to going to visit your family, to creating more memories and more moments where we connect with our roots.
Sí,
And
definitely.
language too, for our kids and for us, and just to expose ourselves a little bit more and create those great memories.
It's true.
Absolutely.
So challenge.
Yes. For
Yes,
sure.
I love
So maybe we will do an episode in Spanish. I don't know. Para practicar nuestro
Maybe.
español, Diana.
And maybe for our girls trip, we only speak Spanish to our girls.
You know what? I love that idea. Me encanta esa idea.
My daughter will be lost.
No, we'll only listen to Spanish music in the car. It's the way there.
No,
Exactly.
I love that. But yes, I think we should end this episode with hope that
Yeah.
our kids will pick up on the Spanish when they are ready for it and just spit it out with confidence. And mommies out there, do not give up. It will happen on their terms, I guess, eventually, but we cannot give up on living our traditions, right? I mean, one of the reasons why we had a quinceañera for Cami, besides her being 15, is because she truly felt the value of a quinceañera, which is something so part of the Mexican culture. And I really love that she
Traditional.
wanted it very traditionally. Yeah, very different from my quinceañera, where my centerpieces were made out of styrofoam cups, girl. No, seriously, I kid you not. But it's just keeping traditions alive.
Yes.
So I promise you, this December, we have to do a posada.
Oh, yeah.
A posada is the
Done.
most beautiful way to keep that tradition, alive, of la piñata, los villancicos,
El ponche.
sin piquete for them, But it is, I think that every season and every month has a motive, a reason where we can just, live it to
And
the
Dia de los
to the max.
Muertos.
I say bien,
Sienna
yeah.
loves the movie Coco. So
Oh
and
my
she's
gosh.
always
you have to
and-
take her to Mexico City.
yes, and
for
she's
that
always
whole
talking about.
experience.
Every time she finds a picture of our dog that passed away last year or my dad, she's we need to save this for the altar. We need to save this for the
Yes.
altar.
But
That's
look, it took
cute.
a movie for many of our kids to know about Dia de los Muertos. How many of us actually had an altar before? I didn't before until I married
didn't.
Omar. My mom, we would go to mass on Dia de Muertos and, pray for our loved ones in heaven. But we never practiced the beautiful tradition of putting up an altar until I married Omar, because his side of the family does it. And then guess what? His father passed away, and now we do the altar at my house, and I
that.
make them, and
Yes.
they're part of it, and it's a
Yes.
beautiful thing to do. But honestly, Disney did
Put it on
do
the map.
a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows about Dia de Muertos thanks
Yeah.
to a movie.
But I think you just touched on something that's so cool and so important, that just because you didn't grow up with a lot of these traditions, you can create them.
Yeah.
You can start your own traditions with your own family or for yourself, and start those new ways of introducing our culture to our kids. And maybe you had parents that didn't do it for you, and you see others and the way they celebrate, or the music or the food, or the traditions, and now it's time for you to create your own traditions and your own passed down
I like
memories.
that. They don't have to be exactly the same.
No, it's the
you can add a little
intention.
twist to it.
It's the intention,
Make it
Goma.
fun.
Es la
Yes.
intención la que cuenta.
yeah,
It is.
I like it. I love it.
But no mommy guilt. Seriously, there cannot
No
be
more
a mommy
guilt.
guilt.
No
Because
more.
guess what? We are still parenting, so there's still time.
Yes.
to
There
dive
is still
in.
time.
There is still time.
Absolutely.
Time has not expired. The kids still live with us. Hello.
Yes.
Yes. And we can continue
know?
it. Even after they go to college, we can still.
Let's download
Yes.
Duolingo on their phones.
There we go. Anyways,
right.
comas, pues las quiero mucho. It's been a great episode again. Hopefully at
Yes.
home, you'll enjoy this topic. Talk to your kids about it, how they feel about their, their heritage, and picking up the Spanish this summer. I mean, seriously, that is
Yes.
a great
Great idea.
exercise.
Yes.
And let's keep traditions alive.
Siempre.
Yes.
After all, we're
Bravo.
Mexicans.
Salud.
Salud.